It's 2026, and as someone who's spent well over 6 months using both Android and iOS phones, I'm going to take you through how each of them compare. Plus, now that iOS 27 is in public beta and Android 17 is out, I can finally take you through things like how the new Siri compares to Gemini, and then bring it all back together and let you decide if you chose the wrong phone to use this year. First, let's start with assistants. Most Android phones have Google's Gemini Assistant. And now, starting with iOS 27, iPhones will use Siri AI, which stands for Siri with Apple Intelligence. Here are just a few things that I've used it for that I'd never use old Siri for. First is visual intelligence. I long pressed the camera control button and asked it what all these symbols on my new shirt meant, and it gave me the correct answer, but then you can take it a step further by asking it things like what settings I should use on my specific LG dryer, and then it gave me the correct settings to use. Another scenario that really impressed me was when I was putting together my grocery list for the week. I knew I was going to be making a salad dressing from Samin Nosrat's book, but I forgot what the recipe was called as well as the ingredients I needed to actually make it, but I did remember that this vinaigrette uses warm water. So I asked Siri for the ingredients. Now, at first, it did not understand my pronunciation of the author's name. But because the new Siri is conversational, I could just be like, no, I mean Samin Nosrat, like the author of Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. And then it followed up with the correct ingredients. Now, so far, everything I've showed that the new Siri can do, Gemini can do as well. And when testing other queries, both gave comparable results and similar response times for queries like the starting price of the MacBook Neo, when the Artemis II astronauts came back to Earth, and what happened at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Hashtag engagement bait. Though one other small difference you'll probably notice is Siri's answers are typically more concise. Gemini has a tendency to just never shut up.
Yes, both SpaceX and Blue Origin faced development delays, leading NASA to rescope the mission because full crewed lunar landers won't be fully ready. Artemis III targeted for 2026.
And Siri is actually really easy to interrupt. You just start talking.
His music company, Bleeding
Are
Fingers-
they planning to use any of John Williams' themes?
It has not been officially confirmed if the
You have to hit the pause button on Gemini and you can't interrupt it, unless you're in the Gemini Live mode. Now, one pretty major difference between the two is illustrated by this next example. My friend recently moved, and I know he sent me his new address somewhere in our iMessage thread, and I forgot to update his contact card with his new address, but I needed it because I wanted to send him something, so I was like, all right, I'll just ask Siri. Not only was Siri able to pull that new correct address from our text message thread, which was impressive enough, but then it asked me if I wanted to update his contact card with the new address. With the new version of iOS 27, Apple actually created a new local search index for all of your personal data in messages, email, contacts, reminders, and any other apps that give Apple access to index. It's pairing the new Siri with that new local spotlight index that gives the new experience that wow factor. And this is also something that Gemini right now on a device like my Pixel 10 Pro XL running Android 17 doesn't do. I had a conversation going between both phone numbers on each device, so they both had access to the exact same conversation. And only Siri was able to give me the address mentioned in that chat, as well as a summary of what's new with Josh T, wonder who that guy is, while Gemini informed me it doesn't have access to chat history. Which is actually kind of crazy. Gemini does not have access to my messages or contacts for surfacing information, at least at the time of recording when I've tried this several times. Now, that of course may change by the time you watch this video. And make sure you follow us at 6montslater.net, where I'll post updates about Gemini and the new Siri in our quick post feed. Now, for the next personal context test, this one involved data from my email, which I know both assistants do have access to, and both were able to correctly surface my Amazon card's due date. The last personal context test I ran was having the phone surface photos of Leo, our family cat, that I took on my Emerald Isle beach vacation this past month, and both were able to do this. Now, the last main category I wanted to test between the two assistants is taking actions for you, like controlling your lights, setting reminders, drafting an email, adding items to your grocery list. Both assistants are capable of doing all of that, though I did think the new Siri was actually a bit better in a few areas. For reminders, it pulled up the Reminders app, and when I asked it again to go to my grocery list, it was able to pull up the correct list within the Reminders app, while Gemini just gave me what was on my list, but not the actual list itself within Google Keep, which I wish it had done. And then when drafting an email, Siri actually pulls up this nice little email draft preview window, which Gemini just didn't do. It just generated text for me to copy and paste into an email client, even though Gmail is right there sitting on my phone. So who wins? Well, to me, I would actually give Siri AI the win. While yes, Gemini does have more capabilities like Gemini Spark in beta for task automation or Gemini Live image generation and then generating AI videos for whoever wants to do that. I think for most people, being able to index your text messages and contacts locally on your device, as well as index other apps that give access to Siri AI, that is going to be a bigger deal for most people. But of course, if you disagree, let me know in the comments. Next up, is Android a better ecosystem and still more customizable than iOS? Well, first, I would definitely give it the point for customizability. While the iPhone has come a long way the past few years, you still can't do things like load different launchers onto the OS or download apps from the web or even use alternative app stores in most countries at least. There's just more you can do with Android, and with Android 17, that goes even further, especially when it comes to new vibe coding tools. Later this year, you'll be able to vibe code widgets for your home screen or use Gemini to vibe code your own Android apps right from your phone. And already today, you can generate icon packs using AI on Pixel devices and generate widgets on Nothing's Android devices. Now, Apple does have some new vibe coding abilities on iOS. You can now use natural language to describe what automation you want to happen on your phone, and the Shortcuts app will just build it for you. Now let's look at the hardware ecosystems for both OSs, and here Android gets a point for variety. There are just way more devices that can run Android than iOS, and that's beneficial because it allows Android devices to vary wildly in their form factor. From foldables, flip phones, slabs, to even a BlackBerry-style device like the upcoming Clix Communicator. And make sure you're subscribed if you want to see our review of that phone. There is one hardware-related thing I want to point out though. Apple is more vertically integrated with its hardware and software than any Android manufacturer, including Samsung. And one advantage of this is it allows Apple to spread more features to more product types faster than its competition. It always feels like Android is catching up to iOS in this specific regard, especially when you consider how features like ultra-wideband for AirTags and Find My, HomeKey Express Mode supported on iPhones and Apple Watches, and the H1 chip in AirPods for seamless connectivity between Apple devices have rolled out over the years. And specifically for Macs and phones, if you want the most interoperability between those two devices, the iPhone has a significant advantage. When you look at Samsung and Windows or Android and Windows, there is some feature parity to what Apple does with the Mac and the iPhone, but it often requires a lot more workarounds and setup, where with the Mac and iPhone, it just works out of the box. Now, another related thing to ecosystems that involves Android is the Android varieties among phone manufacturers. Because Android manufacturers can put their own touches and software on top of stock Android, this causes much more experimentation and, honestly, interesting features among the different Android smartphones. Like the Screenshots app on Pixel, Essential Space on Nothing devices, Desktop Mode with Samsung DeX on Samsung devices, or the Good Lock app on Samsung devices that allows you to just go crazy with customizations. Switching from one Android device to another, while both phones do run Android, can still feel wildly different from one and other with their different hardware and software features, and that's just not something you get with iOS. An iPhone is always pretty much going to feel like an iPhone. Now, another aspect to phone OS ecosystems is how well they play with other devices. I think most people are probably inclined to guess that Apple's ecosystem and devices play better together and overall better than Android's. And that may have been true several years ago, but in 2026, Android has actually made up a lot of ground. Most major Android devices can now finally send files to Apple devices wirelessly. This is thanks to QuickShare's integration with AirDrop, plus you can of course use QuickShare with Windows devices as well as other Android devices like my Pixel tablet. Android devices also support fast pair for third-party audio devices, something Apple doesn't currently do, but is rumored to be opening up in the near future. And Samsung's devices in particular have quite a few integrations across them, from moving phone calls from device to device, switching your earbuds from one device to the other, mirroring your phone on your TV, and integrating better with Windows PCs than iPhones do, though that applies to all Android phones. Plus, with Samsung, you get integrations with all of their appliances as well, without needing to download a bunch of separate apps. It all just works via SmartThings. So, has Android finally eclipsed everything you get in Apple's ecosystem, features-wise? No. For example, focus modes can sync across all of your Apple devices, or way more apps that support the continuity handoff feature so you can pick up from an app that you were working on your phone, on your Mac, or iPad. In general, outside of Samsung devices, most other Android devices cannot match the software ecosystem features that you get with Apple's ecosystem. But because Samsung is so competitive in this space, I'd say for software ecosystem features, this category is a tie. Next up, notifications. And here, once again, the point goes to Android. Why? Well, Android handles notifications in a much more sensible way than iOS. For example, say you get a notification that comes across more as an ad than useful, like pushing me to upgrade to the Samsung Z phone on Google Fi. Well, on Android, I can go into notifications and see all of the different notification categories for a specific app, and then just uncheck the ones I don't want. Not only that, but in the settings page, it conveniently tells you how many notifications you get from each category per week, helping you faster identify the problem category. And if you miss a notification or you accidentally swipe it away, Android has a notification history button down at the bottom left. None of those features exist in iOS. You have to go into each app to try to disable certain categories of notifications, if they even exist at all, and then there's no built-in notification history. Next up, app availability and performance, and here, iOS is the winner. In 2026, even with Claude Code, Cursor, and Vibe coding everything, it's more common than not for indie developers to still develop on iOS first and Android second. ChatGPT, Claude, Arc Search, Acme Weather, all examples of apps in recent years that launched on iOS before Android. And some popular apps like Flighty or Fantastical don't even exist on Android. Next up, messaging. Apple puts a lot of effort into making iMessage the best experience on iOS, but not enough into the experience of texting non-iPhone users. They don't support everything in the RCS standard. You can't tap and hold on a message to reply directly to it like you can on an iMessage, and you can't even schedule a message to send to non-iPhone users, which is annoying as hell. Google Messages doesn't have any of those issues. Messages to iPhones and Android phones are treated exactly the same with all of these same features, and even colors. Point here goes to Android. Next up, phone call features. Overall, the experience here is pretty similar. iOS has finally caught up to Android with better spam call blocking tools. The phone can now pick up unknown calls and ask why they are calling and stay on hold for you too. The only real edge I'd give to Android is phones like the Pixel can do live translations where the other person on the other end of the phone call, their voice will actually come through but in your language, which is pretty cool, and Samsung and Apple's features, all they do is show the live translation on the screen. So I'm going to give the point to Android and Google for going a bit further with that feature. Next up, keyboards. And the point here goes to Android again for just having better keyboard features like Android 17's new Rambler feature. This is a Gemini-powered upgrade to voice typing that lets you dictate commands multilingually, and it supports speech filled with mid-sentence self-corrections, slang, as well as pauses.
Oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated that I'm not feeling well enough to go see The Odyssey in IMAX and don't know what to do with my tickets. Wait, no, this whole text just comes across as whiny. Can you just let my friend know that I'm not feeling well? Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to see The Odyssey, and ask if they want to see it with me later on in IMAX.
Apple's voice dictation feature doesn't have anything close to that. Gemini's voice dictation is just flat out better than Apple's, and so far in the iOS 27 beta, I have not noticed a huge improvement like I was expecting, though that still could change by the time iOS 27 fully rolls out. And don't get me started on Gboard. It's the best keyboard on any phone that I've used. I just type more accurately on it, and it doesn't make as many dumb autocorrections as Apple's iOS keyboard does. And while yes, iOS has gotten a bit better in this area, it's still not quite as good in my experience at least, though if you have a different experience, let me know in the comments. And you can download third-party keyboards like Gboard, but it's not exactly equivalent. True Gboard allows you to float its keyboard, resize it, have one-handed mode, and even change its color palette. It's just much more customizable. Point here goes to Android. Now, before I declare a winner, there are a few other advantages I did want to call out that didn't fit into my previous categories for each OS. Android's biggest one is split screen. Most large Android phones like from Google and Samsung allow you to have a split view with two apps open, something iOS doesn't do. For iOS, there are two things I wanted to call out: passwords and home key. In iOS 27, there's a new feature in Apple's Passwords app that will automatically change compromised passwords for you in the background. I tried this out and found it actually worked relatively well. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good actually. And then there's Home Key and Home Key Express mode, which specifically is for smart locks. And at the time of recording, Android is just starting to roll out Tap to Unlock for smart locks, which Apple has had for 5 years now. And Home Key Express works with locks like the Aqara U400, which I just reviewed, and the Schlage Sense Pro, which I am currently reviewing, to automatically unlock your door by the time that you get to it using a combination of the ultra-wideband chip found in your iPhone, plus the gyroscope and then Bluetooth. All right, so who wins? Given all of the categories, Android comes in at 6 points, iOS with 2 points, and 1 draw. So if you have an iPhone, what do you think? Are the Apple ecosystem features, better apps, and Siri AI enough to keep you locked into the walled garden? And if you're on Android, did anything I just go over convince you to switch? Or, at least pique your interest? Let me know why or why not in the comments, and for a rundown of all of the devices that I showed off in this video, plus links to more information about the features that I talked about, check out the blog post for this video that's linked here as well as in the description and pinned comment. And to see more of my videos on Apple devices like my review of the iPhone Air and iPad Pro, you can click here to get to all of those, and then you can click here to get to my reviews of Google and Samsung devices. For 6 months later, I'm Josh Tedder, and if you made it all the way to the end, let me know by commenting Bug Droid. Thanks for watching.